This is chapter 10. We're going to talk about the emotion and motivation. One of the aspects of this chapter is human sexuality. So, if you don't like to talk about human sexuality, then we talked about fertilization last time. Anyway, we're going to talk about human sexuality and sexual orientation this time. So, let's go ahead and get started. Might as well. Got nothing else to do. Motivation describes the wants or the needs that direct behavior toward a goal. In addition to biological motives, motivations can be intrinsic, arising from internal factors, or extrinsic, arising from external factors. Intrinsically motivated behaviors are performed because of the sense of personal satisfaction that they bring, while extrinsically motivated behaviors are performed in order to receive something from others. Why are you currently in college? If you are here because you enjoy learning and want to pursue an education to make yourself a more well-rounded individual, you are intrinsically motivated. If you are here because you want to get a college degree to make yourself more marketable for a high-paying career or to satisfy the demands of your parents, then your motivation is more extrinsic in nature. Extrinsic and intrinsic. Intrinsic has to do with curiosity and the desire to learn. That's kind of me because I have, uh, when I was younger, I accumulated 5 degrees in 4 different disciplines. And I think I've probably bragged about this before. It took me a while. It's not all that I've studied. I've studied a lot of things, but yeah, I've got degrees in English, political science, psychology, and medicine. Medicine. So there you go. Anyway, intrinsic and extrinsic. There is an old adage, choose a job that you love and you will never have to work a day in your life, meaning that if you enjoy your occupation, work doesn't seem like work. According to research, receiving some sort of extrinsic reinforcement, like getting paid for engaging in behaviors that we enjoy, leads to those behaviors being thought of as work, no longer providing that same enjoyment. As a result, we might spend less time engaging in these reclassified behaviors in the absence of any extrinsic reinforcement. Studies suggest that intrinsic motivation may not be so vulnerable to the effects of extrinsic reinforcements, and in fact, reinforcements such as verbal praise might actually increase intrinsic motivation. Culture may influence motivation. In collectivistic cultures, it is common to do things for your family members because the emphasis is on the group and what is best for the entire group, rather than what is best for any one individual. This focus on others provides a broader perspective that takes into account both situational and cultural influences on behavior. In educational settings, students are more likely to experience intrinsic motivation to learn when they feel a sense of belonging and respect in the classroom. This internalization can be enhanced if the evaluative aspects of the classroom are de-emphasized and if students feel that they exercise some control over the learning environment. And since we're talking about learning environments, I need to tell you that you have a paper that is due in April. There are 35 of you. That's a lot of papers to read. Not only that, but starting next week, I will have another class. It's an 8-week class that covers psychopharmacology, drugs and drug abuse. And then I have a class of the capstone class, the thesis class that I will be reading. Now, the reality is that I can't read your 35 papers, the 8 papers from psychopharmacology, and the 8 papers from the thesis, theses. I can't read them all at one time. So I'm telling you that your paper is due in April, but if it's a little late, don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. So this is how you write a paper. Let me explain to you how you write a paper. You decide what your topic is. Let's say you want to look at vaccines and autism, two very good topics. Some people put them together. Most people think that that's not correct. However, you want to find out, it does do vaccines really cause autism? Is there any proof out there? So what you need to do is you need to find 5 journal articles that deal with that. 5 journal articles that deal with autism. Now you got to be really careful because there are people writing out there that don't have any proof of one way or the other, and that's really fascinating because AI tends to believe what it reads on the internet, and a lot of times what people put on the internet is not true. It's just blatant lies. But AI can't tell the difference between yay and nay. And this is one of the reasons why I don't want you to use AI, because AI doesn't have your brain. AI just thinks that all information on the internet is good, and it just kind of jams it all together, and then it will give you pieces of information. And sometimes it can't find a good journal article that says what it wants it to say, so it will make up a journal article. This happens way, way too much. And that's the reason I don't want you to use that's why if you use Chat GPT, it may write you a paper that it's completely bogus. It may be completely untrue. Now, I just told you that I have 5 degrees in 4 different disciplines. And so the reality is, and one of them is in English. Uh, so the reality is that I can usually tell the difference between something that's written by AI and something that you have written yourself. I can usually do that. So, and if you use a Chat GPT paper, then that is a zero because you didn't actually create the paper. All you did was tell it vaccines and autism, and it wrote your paper for you and came up with your 5 sources. So what you do if you want to write a paper about vaccines and autism or whatever it is, then you find 5 articles, 5 journal articles, um, and write your paper. So and it has to be 5 pages, and you have to have 5 sources. So if you take that first journal article and write a page about what that journal article says, and then take your second article and write a page about what that journal article says, and then the third one and fourth one and fifth one, that gives you enough pages, that gives you 5 pages of text. You will also probably have a half page of introduction and a half a page at the end where you're talking about all these 5 articles. That should be enough to get you through your paper. And if you write it like that, then by golly, you're probably going to be fine. The problem is when sometimes there's not enough good information to write a whole page from a journal article. That happens. And then you'll have to find a 6th article. And that's okay because you can have more than 5, but you can't have less than 5. Okay? So you have a paper due in April. And like I said, I can't read 35 pages or papers 35 papers from you guys. I've got 8 coming in from psychopharmacology, and I've got 8 theses. And the thesis is 30 pages long. So they've got 30 articles that they have to find. But I can't read them all at one time. So if you're a little bit late with it, don't worry about it. Just turn it in whenever you can. But you got to turn it in before May, because if you don't turn it in before May, I won't have time to read it. And if all of you decide, well, I'm not going to turn mine in, he said I didn't have to turn it in until May. If all of you do exactly the same thing, then I'll be reading a lot of papers, and I get real grouchy when I have to read a lot of papers at the end of the semester. So that's a hint and a warning. I get a little grouchy, and when I get grouchy, I get mean. And you may not score as many points as you think you should. So there you go. William James was an important contributor to early research into motivation, and he is often referred to as the father of psychology in the United States. Psychology, of course, started, who knows where it started? It kind of started in ancient Greece, but William James decided, hey, we've been talking about, the Europeans talk about psychology all the time. Americans, they look at different things, and so I'm going to start talking about what I want to talk about, what Americans are more interested in. And he was out of Harvard University, and by golly, he is sometimes thought of as the father of psychology in the United States. James theorized that behavior was driven by a number of instincts which aid survival. From a biological perspective, an instinct is a species-specific pattern of behavior that is not learned. There was considerable controversy among James and his contemporaries over the exact definition of instinct. James proposed several dozen special human instincts, but many of his contemporaries had their own lists that differed from his. A mother's protection of her baby, the urge to lick sugar, the hunting prey were among the human behaviors proposed as true instincts during James' era. A mother's protection of her baby. This view that human behavior is driven by instincts received a fair amount of criticism because of the undeniable role of learning in shaping all sorts of human behavior. In fact, as early as the 1900s, some instinctive behaviors were experimentally demonstrated to result from associative learning. According to the drive theory of motivation, deviations from the homeostasis create physiological needs. These needs result in psychological drive states that direct behavior to meet the need and ultimately bring the system back to homeostasis. Hunger is a drive state that induces eating, which brings the blood sugar and therefore the body back to homeostasis. And there you go, he is eating carbs because he's hungry. A habit is a pattern of behavior in which we regularly engage. Once we have engaged in a behavior that successfully reduces a drive, we're more likely to engage in that behavior whenever faced with that drive in the future. And this is habits like smoking, habits like chewing your fingernails. I was a fingernail chewer for about 35 years until I started teaching. And then I realized, hey, if I keep chewing my fingernails, I'm a bad example for my students. I need to stop doing that. So I started teaching high school. This was in Springfield, Nebraska. I started teaching high school. I loved it. I had a great time. It was just fantastic. And then I'd go to the teachers' lounge, and all of them had chewed their fingernails right down to the quick. By golly, they were all fingernail chewers. So I'm the only one in the school with any fingernails. That included the principal and the vice principal. I was the only person in the school with fingernails. The rest of them had chewed off all of their fingernails, and that's a habit. My mother tried to break me of the habit when I was young. She used to put uh, bad tasting things on my fingernails so I wouldn't chew on them. Didn't make any difference. I would just lick that stuff off and then start chewing on my fingernails. What do your fingernails taste like, you might ask? Well, mine tasted like whatever I was eating. Like they especially tasted like onions, if there was any onions in the food that I ate, as weird as that sounds. Anyway, I chewed my fingernails. My brother sucked his thumb. He was a thumb sucker. He's got an overbite because of it. Extensions of drive theory take into account levels of arousal as potential motivators. These theories assert that there is an optimal level of arousal and we all try to maintain. If we are under aroused, we become bored and will seek out some sort of stimulation. If we are over-aroused, we will engage in behaviors to reduce our arousal. Students tend to be over-aroused at finals time, but generally by the next fall, many students are quite happy to return to school, even though they got over-aroused during finals. Research shows that the level that leads to the best performance is moderate arousal. When arousal is very high or very low, performance tends to suffer. Researchers Yerkes and Dodson discovered that the optimal arousal level depended on the complexity and the difficulty of the task to be performed. The Yerkes-Dodson law holds that a simple task is performed best when arousal levels are relatively high, and complex tasks are best performed when arousal levels are lower. Think, for example, on a football team. You're playing football, and it's the first play of the game, and you've got how many guys do you have? Five, six people that are blocking. Then you have the quarterback, you have the running back, and you have your ends that are trying to catch passes. Your wide receivers are trying to catch passes. So if the simplest act is to block, because all you're doing is banging up against the guy that's coming toward you. So the more aroused that the linemen have, the better blocking that they can do, because it's a simple task, and it takes a lot of arousal to get up for the game. However, if the quarterback is all aroused, then what's going to happen? Well, he's going to throw the ball out of the stadium if he's not careful. So he needs to be controlled. He needs less arousal, and the linemen need more arousal. And that's the way football teams try to get their players to be. They try to get them unaroused. It's really kind of interesting too, because if you look at a basketball game, a lot of times right at the beginning of the game, when everybody's yelling and the cheerleaders are out there, and the guys go out on the court, and they're ready to play the basketball game. If they're not under control, if they're too aroused, then what will happen is they will overshoot all their first shots. And a lot of times at the very beginning of a game, players will overshoot their first shots. And sometimes it takes them 2 or 3 shots to quiet down so that they can start shooting better. Interesting. If they're in the zone, if they're ready to play, but they're not really highly aroused, then potentially they will make their first shots. Self-efficacy is, and it's really kind of interesting because my grandson plays basketball, 8th grade basketball, and it's really kind of interesting. If the first shots that they take are 3-point shots, they don't hit anything. If the first shots they take are layups, they'll hit the layups. They can hit the layups because you don't have to put muscle behind it. All you have to do is lay it into the basketball goal, the hoop. But if it's a 3-point shot, they tend to miss those shots. Anyway, self-efficacy is an individual's belief in their own capability to complete a task, which may include a previous successful completion of the exact task or a similar task. Albert Bandura theorized that an individual's sense of self-efficacy plays a pivotal role in motivating behavior. Bandura argues that motivation derives from expectations that we have about the consequences of our behaviors, and ultimately it is the appreciation of our capacity to engage in a given behavior that will determine what we do and the future goals that we set for ourselves. Some theorists have focused their research on understanding social motives. Among the motives they describe are needs for achievement, affiliation, and intimacy. Achievement, you want to succeed. Affiliation, you want to be successful for the people around you. And intimacy is that success will bring people closer to you. It is the need for achievement that drives accomplishment and performance. The need for affiliation encourages positive interactions with others. The need for intimacy causes us to seek deep, meaningful relationships. Abraham Maslow proposed a hierarchy of needs that spans the spectrum of motives, ranging from the biological to the individual to the social. These needs are often depicted as a pyramid. The lowest ones are physiological needs, then safety needs, then love and belonging, then esteem, and finally self actualization, feeling good about yourself. At the base of the pyramid are all the physiological needs that are necessary for survival. These are followed by basic needs for security and safety, the need to be loved and to have a sense of belonging, and the need to have self worth and confidence. The top tier of the pyramid is self actualization, which is a need that essentially equates to achieving one's full potential, and it can only be realized when needs lower on the pyramid have been met. To Maslow and humanistic theorists, self actualization reflects the humanistic emphasis on positive aspects of human nature. Maslow suggested that this is an ongoing, lifelong process and that only a small percentage of people actually achieve a self actualized state. There are a number of physiological mechanisms that serve as the basis for hunger. When our stomachs are empty, they contract. Typically, a person then experiences hunger pangs. Chemical messages travel to the brain and serve as a signal to initiate feeding behavior. When our blood glucose levels drop, the pancreas and liver generate a number of chemical signals that induce hunger and thus initiate feeding behavior. For most people, once they have eaten, they feel satiation or fullness and satisfaction, and their eating behavior stops. Like the initiation of eating, satiation is also regulated by several physiological mechanisms. As blood glucose levels increase, the pancreas and liver send signals to shut off hunger and eating. The food's passage through the gastrointestinal tract also provides important satiety signals to the brain, and fat cells release leptin, a satiety hormone. The various hunger and satiety signals that are involved in the regulation of eating are integrated in the brain. Research suggests that several areas of the hypothalamus and hindbrain are especially important sites where this integration occurs. Ultimately, activity in the brain determines whether or not we engage in feeding behavior. What we are looking at is the hypothalamus. Yep, that's the hypothalamus. And that little P-shaped thing right below it is the pituitary gland. Our body weight is affected by a number of factors, including gene-environment interactions and the number of calories we consume versus the number of calories we burn in daily activity. In our caloric intake, if our caloric intake exceeds our caloric use, our bodies store excess energy in the form of fat. If we consume fewer calories than we burn off, then stored fat will be converted to energy. Our energy expenditure is obviously affected by our levels of activity, but our body's metabolic rate also comes into play. A person's metabolic rate is the amount of energy that is expended in a given period of time, and there is tremendous individual variability in our metabolic rates. People with high rates of metabolism are able to burn off calories more easily than those with lower rates of metabolism. And one of the interesting things, and I don't know if I say it later on, but one of the interesting differences between males and females is that males have a higher metabolic rate, and females, in order to ovulate, they need to maintain a certain level of body fat. So females tend to have a lower metabolic rate than males do. And since males don't ovulate, they don't need that fat store like females do. Females need the fat store to produce young. Then females will maintain more body fat than males will. And it will be easier for males to lose weight than for females. The set point theory asserts that each individual has an ideal body weight or set point, which is resistant to change. This set point is genetically predetermined, and efforts to move our weight significantly from the set point are resisted by compensatory changes in energy intake and or expenditure. And here we have the different shapes of people. This guy's a pear-shaped guy. This guy's an inverted triangle. This guy's an apple. This guy's a rectangle. And this guy's an hourglass. And here's a female that's a pear-shaped. Here's a female that is an inverted triangle. Female that is an apple. Female that is a rectangle. And a female that is an hourglass. When someone weighs more than what is generally accepted as healthy for a given height, they're considered overweight or obese. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, an adult with a body mass index between 25 and 29.9 is considered overweight. An adult with a BMI of 30 or higher is considered obese. People who are so overweight that they are at risk for death are classified as morbidly obese. Morbid obesity is defined as having a BMI over 40. Being extremely overweight or obese is a risk factor for several negative health consequences. These include, but are not limited to, an increased risk for cardiovascular disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, liver disease, sleep apnea, colon cancer, breast cancer, infertility, and arthritis. Given that it is estimated that in the United States around 1/3 of the adult population is obese, and that nearly 2/3 of adults and 1 in 6 children qualify as overweight, there is substantial interest in trying to understand how to combat this important public health concern. Generally overweight and obese individuals are encouraged to try to reduce their weights through a combination of both diet and exercise. While some people are very successful with these approaches, many struggle to lose excess weight. Okay, there you go. Now my wife's been on a diet for like ever, but she hates to exercise. Anyway, and I don't mind exercising, but I hate to go on a diet. So we're both bullheaded in our own ways, I guess. But I'm not overweight. Bariatric surgery is a type of surgery specifically aimed at weight reduction, and it involves modifying the gastrointestinal system to reduce the amount of food that can be eaten and or limiting how much of the digested food can be absorbed. A recent meta-analysis suggests that bariatric surgery is more effective than non-surgical treatment for obesity, and the 2 years immediately following the procedure. And of course, now we have GLP-1 shots, Ozempic. They're supposed to be for type 2 diabetes, but they also help people lose weight. And so people are using those as well. Here's the bariatric surgery for morbidly obese people. This is a lap band. The gastric bypass. This is a major gastric bypass. This is a mini gastric bypass. And this is a gastric sleeve. Anyway. People suffering from bulimia nervosa engage in binge eating, behavior that is followed by an attempt to compensate for the large amount of food that they consume. Purging the food by inducing vomiting or through the use of laxatives are two common compensatory behaviors. Some affected individuals engage in excessive amounts of exercise or compensate for their binges. Bulimia is associated with many adverse health consequences that can include kidney failure, heart failure, and tooth decay. In addition, these individuals often suffer from anxiety and depression, and they are at increased risk for substance abuse. The lifetime prevalence rate for bulimia nervosa is estimated at around 1% for women and less than 0.5% for men. Unlike with bulimia, binge eating disorder is not followed by inappropriate behaviors such as purging, but they are followed by distress, including feelings of guilt and embarrassment. The resulting psychological distress distinguishes binge eating disorder from overeating. There you go. And she's got a bottle of ketchup and a bottle of mustard there. Oh, there's a mustard bottle right here. One there and one there. Anorexia nervosa is an eating disorder characterized by the maintenance of a body weight well below average through starvation or excessive exercise. Individuals suffering from anorexia nervosa often have a distorted body image, referenced in literature as a type of body dysmorphia, meaning that they view themselves as overweight even though they are not. And she's got anorexia. Wow, that is skinny. Like bulimia nervosa, anorexia nervosa is associated with a number of significant negative health outcomes: bone loss, heart failure, kidney failure, amenorrhea, which is the cessation of the menstrual period, reduced function of the gonads, and in extreme cases, death. Furthermore, there is an increased risk for a number of psychological problems, which include anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and substance abuse. Estimates of the prevalence of anorexia nervosa vary from study to study, but generally range from just under 1% to just over 4% in women. Generally, prevalence rates are considerably lower for men. Oh my goodness, she is one skinny lady. They talk about thigh gaps. Look at the thigh gap on that lady. I should put it there. We go. Ouch. That's ridiculous. While both anorexia and bulimia nervosa occur in men and women of many different cultures, Caucasian females from Western societies tend to be the most at-risk population. Recent research indicates that females between the ages of 15 and 19 are most at risk, and it has long been suspected that these eating disorders are culturally bound phenomena that are related to messages of a thin ideal often portrayed in popular media and the fashion world, and that's why I have these really anorexic ladies walking down the, that's what I call skinny. Tall and slender. See, I don't find that attractive even a little bit. There is a considerable evidence that sexual motivation of both men and women varies as a function of circulating testosterone levels. Though many people have been scandalized by psychology's interest in sexual relations, Freud's identification of sexual repression causing social and mental problems has made sex a ripe subject for research. Alfred Kinsey in the 1940s described a remarkably diverse range of sexual behaviors and experiences in his research. Behaviors that had once been considered exceedingly rare or problematic were demonstrated to be much more common and innocuous than previously imagined. To show this, Kinsey developed a continuum known as the Kinsey scale that is still commonly used today to categorize an individual's sexual orientation. According to that scale, sexual orientation is an individual's emotional and erotic attractions to same-sexed individuals, homosexual, opposite-sexed individuals, heterosexual, or both, bisexual. In the 1960s, Masters and Johnson measured human response to masturbation and the act of coitus. In total, Masters and Johnson observed nearly 10,000 sexual acts as a part of their research. Based on these observations, Masters and Johnson divided the sexual response cycle into 4 phases that are fairly similar in men and women: excitement, plateau, orgasm, and resolution. The excitement phase is the arousal phase of the sexual response cycle, and it is marked by erection of the penis or clitoris and lubrication and expansion of the vaginal canal. During plateau, women experience further swelling of the vagina and increased blood flow to the labia minora, and men experience full erection and often exhibit pre-ejaculatory fluid. Both men and women experience increases in muscle tone during this time. Orgasm is marked in women by rhythmic contractions of the pelvis and uterus along with increased muscle tension. In men, pelvic contractions are accompanied by a buildup of seminal fluid near the urethra that is ultimately forced out by contractions of genital muscles, and this is known as ejaculation. Resolution is the relatively rapid return to an unaroused state accompanied by a decrease in blood pressure and muscular relaxation. While many women can quickly repeat the sexual response cycle, men must pass through a longer refractory period as part of resolution. The refractory period is a period of time that follows an orgasm during which an individual is incapable of experiencing another orgasm. In men, the duration of the refractory period can vary dramatically from individual to individual, with some refractory periods as short as several minutes and others as long as a day. As men age, their refractory periods tend to span longer periods of time. And there you go. Excitement phase, the plateau phase, the orgasm phase, and then the resolution phase. While the majority of people identify as heterosexual, there is a sizable population of people within the United States who identify as homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, or other non-heterosexualities. Research, research suggests that somewhere between 3% and 10% of the population identifies as homosexual. Bisexual people are attracted to people of their own gender and another gender. Pansexual people experience attraction without regard to sex, gender identity, or gender expression. Asexual people do not experience sexual attraction or have little or no interest in sexual activity. Regardless of how sexual orientation is determined, research has made clear that sexual orientation is not a choice, but rather it is a relatively stable characteristic of a person that cannot be changed. Claims of successful gay conversion therapy have received wide criticism from the research community due to significant concerns with research design, recruitment of experimental participants, and interpretations of data. As such, there is no credible scientific evidence to suggest that individuals can change their sexual orientation. Now, this is really kind of interesting because, I've been studying psychology for about 50 years now. And 50 years ago, you wouldn't read this at all. As a matter of fact, 50 years ago, we wouldn't talk about that. As a matter of fact, when I first started in psychology, homosexuality was considered a mental illness. So we have moved well beyond my my first abnormal psychology text that I started studying 50 years ago. And now we have a more realistic understanding of human sexuality. And it's continually evolving. We may be going somewhere else. I don't know. I wouldn't have guessed that there were that I could put this up at 15 years ago. This would have been impossible. Doesn't make any sense. Didn't understand it, and of course now this is a fairly common understanding of sexuality. That it's not as simple as we thought it was. Boy, girl, and that's it. And also now we understand that sexual orientation isn't changeable. It's something that happens in the womb, in essence. And that seems to be from all the people that I've talked to, and I've been around people for a really long time. When you're homosexual, and you know that you are from a relatively young age. when you realize that that sex is something that you want to do. Having been in the military in the 70s, this was just after they that homosexual was no longer a mental illness. Um, I ran into people when I was in the military that were gay, and had long conversations with these select individuals. And I knew from 50 years ago that this is the way the world worked, and that was okay because I knew what I thought, and now I found out how individuals that didn't have my same feelings, how they thought. Really fascinating stuff. So this has always been really interesting to me, human sexuality. It's one of the reasons that I've studied Freud. He makes a lot of sense. Freud makes a lot of sense. Sex is a real driving force in life. So this gay conversion stuff is the idea that you can actually, if you have ideas that go against traditional society, that you can change somebody's orientation. Real controversial stuff. Your textbook doesn't like it, but the reality is this becomes a political issue. When was it? It was about 20 years ago that there was somebody running. The lady that ran with. No, it wasn't the lady that ran with John McCain. That was the lady from Alaska. There was a lady that was up for vice president that they didn't select. And the reason they didn't select her was because her husband, this is what her husband did, made millions of dollars off of conversion therapy. What was her name? She was from Missouri. Oh, wow. Yeah, what was her name? She's from around here. That's why I'm, I'm thinking about it. Wait a minute, let me see if I can find her. Just a real wacko. Conversion therapy. She was running for president. Politics. She was running for president, and people thought, oh, golly. I mean, she was real conservative, obviously. She was real conservative. Let's see her name. About 2000. Let's see if that does anything. It's not, or it wasn't Mike Pence. This is a lady. What was her name? Anyway, it is escaping me at this point, but that's not important. Let's go ahead and talk about stuff. Dr. Robert Spitzer, the author of one of the most widely cited examples of successful conversion therapy, apologized to both the scientific community and the gay community for his mistakes, and he publicly recanted his own paper in a public letter. I believe I owe the gay community an apology for my study, making unproven claims of the efficacy of reparative therapy. Citing research that suggests not only that gay conversion therapy is ineffective, but also potentially harmful, there have been legislative efforts to make such therapy illegal. And there are the states that it outlawed: California, Oregon, New Mexico, Illinois, New York, New Jersey, and someplace else. What's the last one? Delaware? Yeah, Delaware. Many people conflate sexual orientation with gender identity because of stereotypical attitudes that exist about gay and lesbian sexuality. In reality, these are two related but different issues. Gender identity refers to one's sense of being male or female. Generally, our gender identities correspond to our chromosomal and phenotypic sex, but this is not always the case. Phenotypic means the one that is displayed. When individuals do not feel comfortable identifying with the gender associated with their biological sex, then they experience gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a diagnostic category in the 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM-5, that describes individuals who do not identify as the gender that most people would assume they are by looking at them. Many people who are classified as gender dysphoric seek to live their lives in ways that are consistent with their own gender identity. This involves dressing in opposite-sex clothing and assuming an opposite-sex identity. These individuals may also undertake transgender hormone therapy in an attempt to make their bodies look more like the opposite sex. And in some cases, they elect to have surgeries to alter the appearances of their external genitalia to resemble that of their gender identity. Our scientific knowledge and general understanding about gender identity continue to evolve, and young people today have more opportunity to explore and openly express different ideas about what gender means than previous generations. Recent studies indicate that a majority of millennials, those ages 18 to 34, regard gender as a spectrum instead of a strict male-female binary, and that 12% identify as transgender or gender nonconforming. Additionally, over half the people ages 13 to 20 know people who use gender-neutral pronouns, such as they or them. This change in language means that millennials and Generation Z people understand the experience of gender itself differently. As young people lead this change, other changes are emerging in a range of spheres, from public bathroom policies to retail organizations. The current administration, of course, is very traditional, it's very conservative, and they're fighting transgender ideas. They're fighting this. But it seems to be a losing battle. As a matter of fact, if you've read anything about the SAVE Act, President Trump is trying to put anti-transgender legislation into that act. It's really kind of interesting watching them flail around trying to get this thing passed. It's not going to. I don't think it's going to be passed. They would have to do some really amazing things to get it to pass, and I don't think it's going to happen. But it's the idea that we're talking about. Now, you guys are all thinking, well, this is really kind of silly stuff. Why in the world are they even talking about this? And the answer is because they're trying to get their base to vote in the next election. And a lot of those people are very traditional individuals, and they don't think the same way that millennials and Generation Z people think. Issues related to sexual orientation and gender identity are very much influenced by sociocultural factors. Even the ways in which we define sexual orientation and gender vary from one culture to the next. While the United States heterosexuality has historically been viewed as the norm, there are societies that have different attitudes regarding gay behavior. There has historically been a two-gendered culture in the United States. We have tended to classify an individual as either male or female. However, in some cultures, there are additional gender variants, resulting in more than two gender categories. Intersex is a broad term referring to people whose bodies are not strictly biologically male or female. Intersex conditions can present at any time during life. Sometimes a child may be born with components of male and female genitals, and other times XY chromosomal differences are present. I can't even see what it's saying. As we move through our daily lives, we experience a variety of emotions. An emotion is a subjective state of being that we often describe as our feelings. Emotions result from the combination of subjective experience, expression, cognitive appraisal, and physiological responses. Emotional expression refers to the way that one displays an emotion and includes nonverbal and verbal behaviors. One also performs a cognitive appraisal in which a person tries to determine the way he or she will be impacted by a situation. In addition, emotions include physiological responses such as possible changes in heart rate, sweating, etc. Our emotional states are combinations of physiological arousal, psychological appraisal, and subjective experiences. Together, these are the components of emotion, and our experiences, backgrounds, and cultures inform our emotions. Over time, several different theories of emotion have been proposed to explain how the various components of emotion interact with one another. The James Lang theory, we remember William James. He had a brother named Henry James that was an author, but this is William James, the Harvard professor of psychology, the father of American psychology. The James Lang theory of emotion asserts that emotions arise from physiological arousal. The sympathetic nervous system controls our fight or flight response when threatened. Danger would arouse the sympathetic nervous system to initiate significant physiological arousal, which would make your heart race and increase your respiration rate. According to the James Lang theory of emotion, you would only experience a feeling of fear after this physiological arousal had taken place. You become aroused and then you have the emotion. Lang, of course, is, well, you don't know this, but Lang was from Sweden, and James, of course, was from Harvard. The Cannon-Bard theory sees physiological arousal and emotional experience occurring simultaneously, yet independently. The emotional reaction would be separate and independent of physiological arousal, even though they co-occur. And this is Cannon, and this is Bard. The facial feedback hypothesis proposes that your facial expression can actually affect your emotional experience. Research investigating the facial feedback hypothesis suggested that suppression of facial expression of emotion lowered the intensity of some emotions experienced by participants. Researchers used Botox injections to paralyze facial muscles and limit facial expressions, including frowning, and they found that depressed people reported less depression after their frowning muscles were paralyzed. Other research found that the intensities of facial expressions affected the emotional reactions. A big smile will make you happier about the little thing than you would be if you only had a tiny smile. Okay, facial feedback. The Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion is another variation on theories of emotions that takes into account both physiological arousal and the emotional experience. According to this theory, emotions are composed of two factors, physiological and cognitive. Physiological arousal is interpreted in context to produce the emotional experience. Schachter and Singer. The relationship between our experiencing of emotions and our cognitive processing of them, and the order in which these occur, remains a topic of research and debate. Lazarus developed the cognitive mediational theory that asserts our emotions are determined by our appraisal of the stimulus. This appraisal mediates between the stimulus and the emotional response, and it is immediate and often unconscious. In contrast to the Schachter-Singer model, the appraisal precedes a cognitive label. This is Lazarus right here. He is from South Africa. We constantly regulate our emotions, and much of our emotion regulation occurs without us actively thinking about it. Moss and her colleagues studied automatic emotional regulation, which refers to the non deliberative control of emotions. It is simply not reacting to your emotions, and AER can affect all aspects of emotional processes. AER can influence the things you attend to, your appraisal, your choice to engage in an emotional experience, and your behaviors after an emotion is experienced. And this is Dr. Mouse. The idea of AER is that people develop an automatic process that works like a script or schema, and the process does not require deliberate thought to regulate emotions. Once you develop the process, you just do it without thinking about it. Moss and her colleagues found that strategies could reduce negative emotions, which in turn should increase psychological health. Moss has also suggested there are problems with the way emotions are measured, but she believes most of the aspects of emotions that are typically measured are useful. Now, this is kind of a problem. Her name is German, and so the question is, does she pronounce it like, like the Germans would pronounce it, or does she pronounce it like somebody from England would pronounce her name? That's why I keep getting her name pronouncing it two different ways. After about 3 decades of interdisciplinary research, Lisa Barrett argued that we do not understand emotions. Well, there you go. And this is Lisa Barrett right here. She proposed that emotions were not built into your brain at birth, but rather that they were constructed based on your experiences. Emotions in the constructivist theory are predictions that construct your experience of the world. Robert Zients asserted that some emotions occur separately from or prior to our cognitive interpretation of them, such as feeling fear in response to an unexpected loud sound. Zients also believed in what we might casually refer to as a gut feeling, that we can experience an instantaneous and inexplicable like or dislike for someone or something. Ledoux views some emotions as requiring no cognition. Some emotions completely bypass contextual interpretation. His research into the neuroscience of emotion has demonstrated the amygdala's primary role in fear. A fear stimulus is processed by the brain through one of two paths, from the thalamus, where it is perceived, directly to the amygdala, or from the thalamus through the cortex and then to the amygdala. The first path is quick, while the second enables more processing about details of the stimulus. And the interesting thing about Joseph Ledoux is his soul patch right there under his lip. I'm not sure. Maybe he's a jazz musician. Interesting. The amygdala is composed of various subnuclei, including the basolateral complex and the central nucleus. The basolateral complex has dense connections with a variety of sensory areas of the brain. It is critical for classical conditioning and for attaching emotional value to learning processes and memory. The central nucleus plays a role in attention, and it has connections with the hypothalamus and various brainstem areas to regulate the autonomic nervous and endocrine systems activity. And there you go, the amygdala. Amygdala, of course, is Greek for almond, right there. Human research suggests a relationship between the amygdala and psychological disorders of mood or anxiety. Changes in amygdala structure and function have been demonstrated in adolescents who are either at risk or have been diagnosed with various mood or anxiety disorders. It has also been suggested that functional differences in the amygdala could serve as a biomarker to differentiate individuals suffering from bipolar disorder from those suffering from major depressive disorder. All you have to do is look at the structures. The hippocampus is also involved in emotional processing. Like the amygdala, research has demonstrated that hippocampal structure and function are linked to a variety of mood and anxiety disorders. Individuals suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, show marked reductions in the volume of several parts of the hippocampus, which may result from decreased levels of neurogenesis and dendritic branching, the generation of new neurons, and the generation of new dendrites in existing neurons, respectively. While it is impossible to make a causal claim with correlational research like this, studies have demonstrated behavioral improvements in hippocampal volume increases following either pharmacological or cognitive behavioral therapy in individuals suffering from PTSD. Culture can impact the way in which people display emotion. A cultural display rule is one of the collection of culturally specific standards that govern the types and frequencies of displays of emotions that are acceptable. Therefore, people from varying cultural backgrounds can have a very different cultural display rules of emotion. And this, of course, is James Dean. And I'm not sure which movie that's from. Other distinct cultural characteristics might be involved in emotionality. For instance, there may be gender differences involved in emotional processing. While research into gender differences in emotional display is equivocal, there is some evidence that men and women may differ in regulation of emotions. Let me give you an interesting example. It's really kind of interesting because when we talk about Russians, Russians don't display their emotions very frequently. And Russians, when something emotional happens and you react emotionally, Russians will kind of look at you as if something, as if there's you're nutty as a fruitcake. It's really kind of interesting, and we see that in American movies. We see that on television. If you're watching somebody that has a Russian character, they take everything without reacting to it. But it's really kind of interesting because my wife and I watch a television show that is made in New Zealand, totally different culture from the U.S. culture, and they have the one of the programs has a Russian pathologist, and something really strange will happen, and the Russian pathologist won't react at all. Um, as a matter of fact, the pathologist is a female, and here, the New Zealander is reacting. The female New Zealander is reacting one way, and the male New Zealander is acting like a New Zealander. And then the Russian female will come in, and she'll see a murder scene, and she'll smile and laugh and make jokes. It's really kind of weird uh, because in New Zealand, they're showing the Russians as having the similar emotional responses to what we see on American television. Emotion is not only displayed through facial expression, we also use the tone of our voices, various behaviors, and body language to communicate information about our emotional state. Body language is the expression of emotion in terms of body position or movement. Research suggests that we are quite sensitive to the emotional information communicated through body language, even if we're not consciously aware of it. And that is the end of your chapter. So, okay. There we go. Okay. So I'll see you guys next week. Chapter 10. Okay.